And we're live. Okay. Hello, book lovers. Welcome to the 133rd episode of Authors Love Bookstores, broadcasting here on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Kimberly Hensle Lowrance. If you're new to A Mighty Blaze, welcome. We're a group of volunteer creatives who host online literary events to support books, authors, and the wider publishing community. Here on Authors Love Bookstores, my co-host, Joe Moldover, and I bring you conversations between authors and their favorite indie booksellers to shine a light on storytelling, creativity, and the small businesses that enrich our communities. I've been looking forward to today's episode, and so let me, without any further ado, introduce our guests. So, first of all, I am thrilled to welcome my friend Jane Roper to the show today. Jane. You say you're my friend and then I call you the wrong name. Jane is the author of two novels, The Society of Shame, which we'll be discussing today, and Eden Lake. She's also written a memoir, Double Time, How I Survived and Mostly Thrived Through the First 3 Years of Mothering Twins. Jane's writing has appeared in Salon, McSweeney's, The Millions, Poets and Writers, LitHub, NPR, and elsewhere. And it's also been included in the anthology Labor Day, True Birth Stories by Today's Best Women Writers. For the past 2 years, Jane was a producer and on-air host for The Zeitgeist here on A Mighty Blaze, where she interviewed authors whose books tackled of-the-moment themes like gender, race, class, culture, ability, technology, and health. We're going to include a link below in the comments so you can check out The Zeitgeist after today's show. If you haven't watched Jane before, her interviews are fantastic. In addition, she's a freelance copywriter and brand strategist. She's also a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop and lives outside Boston with her family. Also with us today is Noah Ford. Noah is a book buyer and event coordinator for SHERMAN'S Maine Coast Bookshops, which is an independent bookstore, like empire, I guess is the right word, Noah, in the great state of Maine. Did you say yes? It is an empire. It's the SHERMAN'S is located in 9 communities along the coast of Maine. I'm going to list them all because Maine names are awesome. So Bar Harbor, Dharmascotta, Booth Bay Harbor, Freeport, Rockland, Topsham, right? I just said that one wrong. Is that right? Topsham. No P. Okay, it's very New England. Windham, Falmouth, and Portland. So if you live in Maine, you've been to SHERMAN'S. If you're traveling to Maine for the summer, which is such a gorgeous time to be in Maine, you absolutely want to stop by the stores. There's all 9 of them are open all year round, 7 days a week, which is fantastic. And we're going to include a link below to the history of the bookstore because I really enjoyed reading about it. But I have to point out this important fact, which is SHERMAN'S was founded in 1886 by Bill Sherman. He opened as a stationery store. His 4 daughters took over and ran it into the 60s. It included a printing press and a bookstore. They sold it to Bill and Pat Curtis, who expanded it. And now, Noah will correct me if I'm wrong, but the 3rd generation of Curtis family members are involved in running the bookstore, and it's the bookstores. And Sherman sells more than books. There's books. It's the place to go to get Maine memorabilia, stationery, jewelry, many, many other things. So, I mean, more than 135 years, 9 stores. That's amazing. I'm going to talk about that today. So, welcome, Jane. Welcome, Noah. We've already seen some comments and questions from audience members. Thank you for that. Please keep them going, and we'll get to as many as we can later on. So, Jane, when I invited you to be on the show, you said, yes, and I want to be on with SHERMAN'S. So tell me about your connection to the bookstore, your efforts to be declared an official Mainer, and why SHERMAN'S. Why did you want to talk to Sherman's?
I'm never going to get declared a Mainer. So yeah, thank you for having me. First of all, I'm so excited to be here. So I spent basically the first 14 summers of my life in Maine, full summer. My mom was the program director at a summer camp. I was there like literally 4 months old, being carried around. And then my parents did their own camp programs. So I was like a staff brat at summer camps in, sort of mid-coast, kind of between Waterville and Belfast, Maine. And one of my favorite things always was taking the day trips to the towns on the coast, and including Bar Harbor, including Boothbay Harbor, Camden, which I think you guys don't. It's one of the few towns you don't have a location. But I loved going into bookstores and gift shops, including Sherman's, and that to me was just like such a treasured, beloved part of Maine summers for me. So, and now my mother lives in Freeport. My parents lived there, moved up to Freeport, Maine in 2002. So whenever I am up there, I always try to pop into the Sherman's there. So, and I just love, the fact that it's old, that it has this legacy, this history, the fact that I love the browsing, the gifts and the stationery, and that it just has this wonderful like old New England feel. And I'm just super fond of it. And yeah. So I was like, I gotta do Sherman's, man. It's just like the nostalgia factor and I love that you guys have become an empire. I think that's fabulous.
Noah, we've had on many bookstores, so episode 135, so many bookstores. We've had on a handful of bookstores that have been in operation for over 100 years, but not a bookstore that is the scale of Sherman's with 9 different locations. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like what is unique about Maine, about your business that has allowed it to expand and be so embraced by the community? Because I feel like that's unusual.
Yeah, especially in Maine, especially a small area. I am in Topsom right now, and we had lots of bookstores come in and quickly kind of fade away. So the success of Sherman's is pretty unique. I think at the beginning, when the Curtises started taking it over, they really filled a niche that people wanted and needed in those communities, like stationery, office supplies, especially those areas like Bar Harbor that are more seasonal, but do have year-round people. Boothbay Harbor too, Damariscotta, all of those guys. But I think they really listen to the demand, what people are looking for, and all of the different kinds of people that come in. There's really something for everyone. And that's what's great. There's always a book for everyone, from kids to history buffs to fiction, literary stuff. Anyone can find something, cookbooks. But as far as the gifts as well, there's things for people who are just visiting Maine for the first time, want to send something home to remember it by, for their kids, or even just, are looking for some Maine taffy or chocolate. We really cover the whole gamut. So I think that's really our unique feature. And a lot of those stores, 4 of them, were within the last year and a half. So they've really expanded quickly into markets that really didn't have bookstores before, especially at this scale. What we're able to carry is we're very lucky with the amount that we can have in the space and money-wise. So I think that's what makes us pretty unique.
I read something in your history that said when the Curtises took over, they just decided that if someone came in and needed something, they would carry it. Like, you need pens, we got pens, right? That's going to make sense in a bookstore. But is there anything in the store that you think this is a very unusual thing for us to be carrying? Like, still after all of these years, like someone would be surprised to come into Sherman's and to find this item.
I'm always surprised that we have catnip toys. That's interesting. I mean, everything else is pretty what you would expect, like outdoor fun stuff, especially during like summer activities, and plushies. I love plushies. That's one of my favorites. So I always go for those. But yeah, nothing too weird. Pretty much what you would expect or what you're looking for, really.
Okay. Well, Jane has cats. 1 cat, 2 cats.
Perfect.
Two cats, one of whom sucks. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's actually in Jane's official bio. If
It's
you go
my
to
official bio.
janeroper.com.
There's always one.
See, what I love about a store. So I've when we've gone on day trips with our kids to Boothbay Harbor, which is a fun place to go with kids. Like, what I love is I could go and just browse books forever, and they can be downstairs, like, when they were younger, playing with whatever, like toys and blah blah blah. So it helped me buy some time for me to go and do my book thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Except when they want to buy stuff. Then be like, can I get this? Can I get this?
I have taken my kids to the Dharmascotta Sherman's, where I have looked at books and they have meandered around the store and then, gone across the street to get ice cream, right? Like the perfect sort of Maine afternoon. And another thing to do on a perfect Maine afternoon, New Mexico afternoon, Arizona, Nevada, pick your state, would be to read Jane's book, The Society of Shame. Congratulations, Jane. I love this book. Jane has heard me say that to her many times. A confession that I got to read early pages of this many years ago in our writing class. I loved it then.
It helped make it better.
Oh, well, you did all that yourself. For sure. But what I love about this book was that I chortled like a lot reading it and guffawed. I laughed a lot and I just loved it so much. And I'm not the only one. The reviews were terrific. The Washington Post says the book is clever and inventive, charged with plenty of zingers. Publishers Weekly says that readers will be swept along by Roper's scrappy heroine. Kirkus calls The Society of Shame astutely written with the perfect balance between humor, heartbreak, and understanding. Shelf Awareness says wicked and wickedly funny send-up of cancel culture and a serious examination of the distinctly modern thrill of taking offense. Shelf Awareness goes on to say that the book is brilliantly executed, well-sustained, and truly hilarious. Yay! Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So if there are audience members out there who have not yet read The Society of Shame, what is your book about, Jane Roper?
I'm so glad you asked, Kimberly. So The Society of Shame is about a 47-year-old wife, mom, copy editor, Kathleen Held, whose husband is a very ambitious, charismatic politician running for the U.S. Senate. She comes home early from a trip one night, which is never advisable. Don't come home early from trips, and finds her garage on fire, her husband on the lawn in his underwear, and his attractive young staffer passed out nearby with her underwear dangling from her ankle. And chaos ensues. And turns out that a bystander at the scene takes a photo, and the photo captures all of this, including a period stain on the back of Kathleen's pants. And that photo quickly goes viral, catapulting her to fame as the unwitting figurehead for a new movement called #YesWeBleed, to destigmatize periods and exact menstrual justice. And she's not happy about this. So it's about what happens from there on out. And as she learns how to navigate her new fame and the fickleness of fame and fickleness of approval or disapproval by the internet masses. And she gets stumbles across something called the Society of Shame, which is a group of folks who have all become internet famous, been canceled, or otherwise, humiliated, I guess, online. And they help her figure out what to do next.
So good. And so I'm really curious, what was the moment that started this book for you? Was there a particular question that you were trying to answer with this book? Was there someone's internet infamy that caught your eye and you wanted to riff on that? Where did the book start?
Well, yeah, I mean, it began with a fascination in internet fame and online shaming, and what that journey would look and feel like, especially to someone for whom it would be the ultimate nightmare. I mean, I think for a lot of people it would be a nightmare, but for someone like the character of Kathleen, who is shy and very private, I thought, oh, what would happen in that sort of scenario? And so I first started thinking about, okay, well, to find out that your spouse is cheating on you in a very public way would be really humiliating. But how can I make it even worse? Like, let's have her get her period. And from there, it just sort of, I didn't initially have that in mind, but it worked out well, because then I was like, oh, okay, well, this could turn into a movement. This can turn into something bigger. But yeah, as a longtime creature of the internet since the very early days, I started blogging in 2006. So I've always been just super engaged and fascinated by the way people behave online. And Yeah, I wanted to just send up every aspect of that, but also provide some food for thought too.
And the book definitely does that. I mean, there's this level. I mean, I talked about how I laughed several times. I mean, pretty much every chapter, I'm like laughing at something. But that's that. I don't want to negate the fact that there's a very serious message that you're making in this book about the downside of the internet and the way that people can be ruined by it, by a simple mistake. And I think about having kids, right? With kids on the internet, and how when I was a kid and I made a mistake or something embarrassing happened, I could just live in my brain over and over and I could revisit it, but it would eventually fade. But now you make a mistake or something embarrassing happens and it becomes everyone else's business.
Right. Forever and ever and ever.
And ever and ever and ever.
And there's great, the power can be for good in many ways, right? I mean, some people have been exposed and held accountable who really needed to be held accountable, right? I mean, and the way that the internet and social media has launched the Me Too movement and, hi, Chris, and, the Black Lives Matter movement, like it's been this incredible force for good. At the same time, it can be a source, there can be this, this ruthlessness about it, and the way that, and like you said, mistakes that are sometimes smaller mistakes get just that people get branded with them forever. And human beings are often flattened, right? I think so much of the time when people are having discourse online or talking about things or people online, it becomes, there's utter lack of nuance, right? Utter lack of acknowledging people's humanity. So it can be a nasty place, but so much fun to make fun of.
A lot of fun to make fun of. And I think that point about the lack of nuance is a really important one, because that definitely feels like that's one of Kathleen's challenges, is that this like incredibly awful moment in her life, finding out that her husband's cheating on her, it almost becomes like, that's like secondary to this like period mishap. And like every woman has had that happen, and it shouldn't actually be embarrassing. And that's something that you touch on in this book. And you wrote a great piece on Cognoscenti, which we're going to post below, about just like the changing views about menstruation and all these sorts of things that younger generations have. I loved reading that. And so again, to our audience, check that out. And we definitely see that in the book, because Kathleen has a young daughter and she gets caught up in that. And that mother-daughter relationship is a beautiful, beautiful piece in the book as well.
Yeah, she's more enlightened than her mother in some ways, and in a lot of ways. Yeah, and my children are more enlightened than me, so.
Yes, but we don't tell them that.
No, never.
Keep that a secret. We have to pretend that we know everything. Says a parent of a teenager to a parent of a teenager. Do you remember the first scene you wrote?
I wrote the opening scene was the first scene.
Was it really?
Yeah, I mean, that crazy scene just, and when I did that, I was really just kind of playing, but I knew I wanted to write something funny and something satirical, which I'd never really done before. So Steve Martin, I think it was Steve Martin who said, if your first joke is like, I'm totally misquoting this, I don't know the reality. If you like start totally absurd and you start crazy, you're giving yourself permission to be like, that's the extent of the crazy you can go. So like everything up until that. So it's like, start as far out and as crazy as you plan to go. So that's kind of what I did. And I just pushed myself to make it more absurd. And, from there on out, I was kind of off to the races.
Excellent. I love any reference to Steve Martin that can be made. He has a couple great books too.
He does.
His memoir about becoming a comic, that's great. And people should check it out from Sherman's. Oh, that's a reminder. We're including links below to purchase The Society of Shane from Sherman's. And are you going to be at Sherman's coming up?
Yes. I'm going to be at the Freeport store on Saturday from 1 to 3.
Great. So I'm sure if you're going to buy it today, you could put in the notes that you want to pick it up at Freeport to get a signed copy. So definitely check that out. That's a great transition to Noah. Noah, so one idea I got from our comments is that if people are going to Maine this summer, they should do the Sherman's tour. So go to all 9 stores. Do you guys have like a little visitor's card, like go to
The
all
passport,
9
yeah.
We should. I think, now that we have 9 of us, we'll have to get something kind of like a little Easter egg hunt or something.
Yeah.
How does having 9 stores work? Do you buy the same? Because you're the book buyer. Do you buy the same for all 9 stores? Do they have different inventory? How does that work?
Yeah, so everyone has, like, if one store has one book, then all stores are probably going to have that book, unless you're Bar Harbor and you have maps for Acadia, kind of niche, not necessarily relevant to everyone. But for the most part, they have the same stock. They might have different numbers of the same stock. For instance, our Portland store is going to sell a lot more of mainstream fiction, contemporary fiction, than something like our Rockland store, who has a little bit of a seasonal uptick, but more kind of a year-round literary community who are, sometimes they go for more sci-fi, so genres, but also main fiction. And I find that in like our Booth Bay Harbor store, we have a lot of people interested in coming, getting books from Maine authors to see what we're cooking up here. Because it's a lot different. And I think that a lot of people are looking for um, culturally relevant things while they're here. So a lot of Maine mysteries. But for the most part, everyone kind of has the same stock. And that's because we want to be, to a certain degree, consistent in what we're offering. And also that any Sherman's that you go to, you're going to find what you're looking for. So.
And do you buy for all 9 stores?
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, the power, Noah.
Yeah, it's a fun game.
It's a fun. You have to figure out how many for each store, and that sounds like that would be
a lot of predicting.
And then, what is the relationship between the 9 stores? Because they're in. I just find that really interesting. Like, how do they work together? Do they do joint events? Is there sort of an overall goal for all of them? Do they do their own thing? How do they?
All of the above, really. To a certain degree, each one is unique. Every single one that I've gone into has its own charm in a different way, its own feeling. I love the Damascotta store because it's just such a lovely space, but also they have a cafe, which I love. But I also love Bar Harbor because it's in a really historic building. And even though it's like sardines in a can in the summer, it's just fun to know that you're in a super old bookstore, the oldest in Maine, and that's the original building that one was in. So it's very interesting. But we work together. Everyone communicates with each other via email on weekly meetings, and all of our stock is able to get transported between stores. So if you come into one store and we don't have the book, but Freeport has the book, we can either get Freeport's book to us or hold it in Freeport for you. So we're pretty fluid. We have deliveries that go out in between the stores every week. So we're pretty connected that way. And we're always problem solving together. So we're all individual, but we all work together.
Excellent. And so in addition to being the book buyer, you also run events.
Yes.
Just like we mentioned, so Jane's going to be there on Saturday.
Yeah.
When you're at a dinner party and people say, Noah, tell me about being an event coordinator for a bookstores, what's the event that you talk about? Like, what's the one that like, oh, I got to tell you this event. This was fantastic or terrifying or, we've had lots of interesting stories, but from a book event people over the past 3 years. What's your favorite or your most memorable?
Well, I think it's probably ones that haven't happened yet, because you just never know what you're going to get.
Just wait until Saturday. I'm mess shit up, man.
I'm really excited for Jane's. I think that it's a really more interesting book than we get on the day-to-day basis. There's a lot of local authors, which is awesome, but something different is always nice. This year we are getting Ann Patchett, which is probably the biggest name that we're getting. And so that'll be very exciting. She's coming to Bar Harbor, which I think is the perfect spot for her in August. So that will be fun. But yeah, I think that anything could happen. And you know what? I should mention that we're getting Janet Mills in July to Damariscotta, who's our governor.
Yeah.
So she was the influence for a book written by, I think she's a native New Hampshire author, but she exchanged letters during the first year of the pandemic with Janet Mills to kind of get through it as a mother and as just an American kind of stuck at home. And so that'll be very interesting, but it'll be, I think, a circus in the best way possible. Anything could happen there. But yeah, I've only been the events coordinator for about a year. And so far, it's just been a crazy roller coaster. There's a lot of demand and a lot of requests for signings. So I am always busy, which is great.
That's a good problem. So
Yes.
we included the link below to the events for Sherman, so you can check it out if you're going to be in Maine this summer and want to check out these events. Who's the person you want to get that you haven't gotten? You can manifest it. You can send it out to the internet now, because I've done that. I recently did that. I recently said on the show a dream guest I wanted to have, and then I booked her. So tell me, other than Jane Ripper, of course. So tell me, tell us, is there someone that you're like, oh?
Well, we have a lot of Stephen Graham Jones fans, a lot of horror interests around here. And I think that if he came, our other book buyer would lose her mind. And
probably Stephen King. I mean, there's another.
Of course, Stephen King, but I think the world would implode.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, he doesn't even do events. I mean,
yeah, not anymore.
Why would he?
Okay, but we're including links below to these authors that you can buy their books from Sherman's, and definitely the Society of Shame. Mm-hmm. Jane, I mentioned earlier, again, this book is very funny, but it has a lot of important messages. And I wondered, how do you write funny? Like, that is such a hard challenge, I would think, as someone who is unable to do that. If someone's watching right now and they think, I really like to include humor in my work in progress, what would be some advice that you would give them?
Oh dear. I didn't think I could write funny fiction until I wrote this book either. So I don't know that I'm like the greatest. It took me a long time to get there. I've been, writing humorous nonfiction, but for like decades, I was like, no, I can't write funny fiction, even though everyone was telling me to. I was ignoring them. I think a dialogue is a really good way to do it, because I think it's maybe one of the ways that you can bring it in subtly, even if in a book that's not necessarily supposed to be haha funny book, but people say funny things and people can say quirky things. I think also sometimes just adding in an incongruous detail can add humor. Like I remember writing something once and I was like bored. This isn't in the Society of Shame, but something else. I was, writing a sort of a funny story. And I just was like, I think this scene needs a turtle, because a turtle will entertain me. So I'm just going to put a turtle in here. I think that's good humor advice in general. Put a turtle in it. You can quote me on that. Exaggeration. I mean, and that's satire is, one of the best ways to do satire is with exaggeration, but not like crazy exaggerate, like just enough, just a little bit. And so that's what I tried to do with Society of Shame. Although, I mean, gosh, so much of our culture, like our just this moment, like so much feels satirical, even when it's not. Yeah. It's hard to stay a step ahead of that.
So turtle or swan.
Or a swan. Yes. Yes. Animals are kind of funny. I mean, that's probably cheap, humor, but I don't know. I'm a beginner at it myself. So maybe other beginners can, put a swan, a turtle, maybe a hamster. I don't know. Hamsters aren't as funny.
Improbability is what you're saying. That's the great advice there.
That's a smart way of putting it. Yes. Thank you.
If you're watching and you're wondering, how is a swan connected to this story, you need to get the book. Okay. We're not going to tell you, but I do appreciate your swan necklace, Jane.
Yes, thank you. Jenna Blum, co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, found this for me on Etsy and insisted that I buy it for myself. So I did.
Was there a moment, as someone who's been online for, since the early days of blogging, was there a moment when you thought this internet thing is really out of control? When there was some story that went viral and you kind of filed it away as maybe part of the origin story for the Society of Shame? Was there? Oh, yes, you're saying yes. Okay, what
Yes.
was that?
There, so in the mommy blogosphere of which I was a part, I remember there was a woman who wrote a blog post, and I can't even remember the substance of it, but the upshot was something like talking to her daughter about keeping herself safe from a sexual harassment or sexual assault, and she was saying something about like being cautious about, she said it in a subtle way, but like I think the upshot was she was talking about being mindful of like how you dress in certain situations. And man, people did not like this at all. And people were just sort of piling on her from all corners of the blogosphere, coming to her blog. People who'd never read anything that she'd written before, so didn't know her as a writer or a person, and just like, going nuts on her in the comments, and then writing their own pieces about it. And so it was this was before social media, but it was sort of the version of sort of online shaming, kind of a, angry mob kind of thing. And I remember seeing that and being like, Jesus, everyone, can we chill out? Like, my God, it's okay to have a disagreement or whatever, but it was the first time I'd seen this sort of like torches and pitchforks kind of behavior online. And it was kind of disturbing, even though like I also found what she wrote a little problematic. I was like, my God, this is maybe we could all take a breath here.
Do you think it's possible for someone to be redeemed after an internet scandal, or ever to escape what's happened? I think about some people who are celebrities now. And, I have a teenager who might say, oh, I really admire this reality television star. I will not say who, and I will say, oh, well, that person got their start by doing a sex tape. Like, I know that from 20 years ago, but my daughter, like that, might not be something she would find when she Googles someone. And I'm always curious, like, can we ever escape what happens to us online? And can we ever be redeemed, or does it stay with us forever and ever and ever? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I do think that in many cases there should be an opportunity for redemption. Not all cases. I'm okay with like Bill Cosby not redeeming himself and Harvey Weinstein not redeeming, and many others along those lines. But, I think for lesser infractions or things, I would hope that there is a chance for redemption. But so, I think part of what I wanted to explore in the book is what happens to people afterward, and who does do this sort of work of self-reflection, or who doesn't, who kind of digs in their heels. But also, who do we forgive and not forgive? And I think it seems to vary quite a lot, right? And I don't know that there's one answer or another.
Noah, what do you think? I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, I grew up with the internet, and I think that it's similar in the book, but I think that at a certain point you have to learn to live with it in a certain way, and embrace it, and maybe redefine it in a way, depending on, again, what it was, what happened. It's very prescient.
Yeah.
You have to hope that. You have to hope that some people will allow you to move forward and move on and redefine, because you can't, even without the internet, you can't erase completely things that have happened. You can't erase your mistakes. All you can do is move on from them.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we don't want our audience to do though is move on from this great book. See how I did that segue?
Yeah, you're so good like that. Look at you.
So again, we're including links below to purchase your copy from the Society of Shame. And this is a great time, to ask the two of you what you're reading. So Jane, what's on your bedside table? Noah, what is popular in the store, or what's coming down the pike that as a book buyer you have your eyes on that you're really excited about? Noah, can we start with you? What's something that you're very excited about for the store or for publishing in general?
There are so many. There's a lot coming out in the fall, which seems far away, but Stephen King has a new one coming out. That will be a big one.
Okay.
Always is. But I think a recent release that a lot of people are excited about, and that is huge at SHERMAN'S, is Emily Henry's new book, The Happy Place, which
Oh,
partially takes place in
yes,
Maine, of course.
yes,
Oh.
yes,
But
I read it. It's
also,
good.
we
Yep.
love Emily Henry here. And so does everyone else, it seems. Just a great summer read by an author who really, much like Jane, there's funny parts, there's lighthearted parts, but she really incorporates a lot of real life into it. So much that it's not just like a romance that it could be billed as, but it's really like real life contemporary fiction. So I always recommend Emily Henry.
That's good. I like that book. That was a good read. And we'll put the link below for people to pick it up. Jane, what about you? What are you reading?
Well, I have two books. I'm doing more alternating. And one of them is Breakfast of Champions by Kurt Vonnegut, which is not a new release, but I've never actually read it. But the other book is actually a Maine book. It's called Down East, and it's by a woman named Gigi George, and it's nonfiction, and it follows 5 young women from Washington County, which is like way, way, way northeast Maine. And so, it's a pretty rural area. And just sort of, it just follows like their lives and coming from an area that has some problems and challenges, and how they're sort of defined by those, or limited or not limited by. Anyway, it's a fun read. It's a really, thought-provoking. It's not like a laugh-a-minute kind of read, but it's really good. And I think for folks who want to learn more about a certain part of Maine, it's really good.
Excellent. When you think about your childhood and the books that you read, because that's so much about who we are as readers, as adults, and especially since we have a writer and someone who buys books, who is immersed in putting books in people's hands. When you think about your childhood, what was a book or books that you read that you love, that shaped the way you view reading now? I'm so curious. I'm so fascinated. Noah, what did you read as a kid?
My favorite series was probably A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket.
Yep.
They were just so strange and off the wall and unique. And his voice, his narration is very different than a lot of other books. It's not just plot based. There's a lot of talking about writing, talking about reading, talking about storytelling, words, like huge words that I wouldn't have known in 3rd grade unless I read these. And I think that really opened my eyes to what books can be. And really just, I started the first one and I ripped through the whole series within months. And that really, I didn't stop reading after that. So those were really influential.
That is a wonderful endorsement, Noah. Showed me what books could be. That's amazing. Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Jane, what about you?
I loved the Little House on the Prairie books when I was a kid. I read all of those, and just being immersed in that world and that time and that place. And I remember just loving the way living in that, they're on the frontier or whatever, like just the simplicity of that life. I think there was something very freeing about that. Like the idea that for Christmas, you got a cookie and an orange and a little paper heart. And that was like this thrill. I think there was just something kind of magical about that. And I know if I went back and look at those books now, I would probably see them quite differently. And there would probably be things I'd be like, oh, yikes. Like just way Native Americans are dealt with. However, those books to me really sparked a love of reading, just in the way of how immersive it could be to take you to another time and place.
Wonderful. Tell me about the literary community in Maine, Noah. I think people always think of Stephen King, right? Of course, we've already talked about that's it. But there are many other authors who live in the great state of Maine other than Mr. King. When you think about the literary community, how would you describe it to viewers like us? Would you say it's very active? Would you say it's sort of concentrated in one area or another? What kind of
it's very, very active, but very, very diverse. And I think that people from all areas are writing. I think that they're really influenced and inspired by different parts of Maine. There's a lot of nature that inspires people. The coast inspires people, the ocean. So there's a lot. anywhere from nonfiction and history about Maine, which is really fascinating, to even romance that takes place in Maine, or people's memoirs about owning farms in Maine. It's from the littlest kind of thing to the biggest thing that you can imagine. And the writers and readers are very active in buying Maine writers. And I just see it getting more and more active in the coming years, which is great.
Excellent.
There's a book that got a lot of attention last year, The Night of the Living Res, and I can't think of. Oh yes, there it is. That's on my TBR.
It's very good.
Yeah, but that there's a whole other angle of the Native experience, and that one has gotten a lot of buzz.
Yeah, it's excellent.
Excellent. So we'll put a link below to pick up that book as well. Jane, we have an audience question for you. Let's put it up on the screen. Renee asks, Jane, will you be coming to Southeast Florida on your book tour? I know we're talking about Maine, but if we go all the way down the coast of the United States.
I wish. Yeah, my tour, such as it is a bit confined to places I can afford to visit, and that where I know a decent quorum of people that I can get out to come to an event. But yeah. Unfortunately, Florida is not on the docket right now. I would be thrilled though if it is in the future. So we'll see what happens. Maybe if people buy enough books, I can get to Florida.
But that's a great reminder to hop over to janeroper.com, where you can sign up for Jane's Substack, which takes on writing and aging and parenting and a whole host of topics. Definitely worth.
Very random. It's a little eclectic. Yeah.
It's worth subscribing. I always find it very entertaining. I always stop what I'm doing to read Jane's Substack. So we'll put the link below as well to check that out. So Jane, one of the things about this book I mentioned is the relationship between Kathleen and her daughter Aggie. And Aggie. And you are a parent of children, and I wondered how your children responded to the parent-child relationship that you've depicted in your book. Do they think you got it right? Have they given you feedback, or have they not?
They have not finished reading the book yet, so I don't know. Cleo, our daughter Cleo, I think she's like about 60 or 70 pages in, but I keep getting like preempted by more important things she has. She's like, now she has to read The Catcher in the Rye for school, so. And then, Elm, our other kiddo, was reading American Gods by Neil Gaiman, and that's almost like it's really long, and I have to finish it. So, we'll find out what they think if they ever get around to reading it.
I love that. Like,
it's certainly
J.D. Salinger, Neil Gaiman, mom. J.D. Salinger, mom.
I can't complain too. I kind of can't blame them for prioritizing those guys over me, but the relationship is certainly the character of Aggie is certainly inspired a little bit by both of the kids. Yeah.
So what's next, Jane? You have an event this Saturday at Sherman's. We want people May 20th.
And actually tonight I'm at in an hour, I'm going to be at Longfellow Books in Portland. So I'm hitting 2 different Maine spots. And actually I'm also speaking at my mother's book club tomorrow, which is probably the most exciting of the 3. But I've got some other events around Massachusetts and heading down to Philly later. It's all good ways for me to avoid starting the next book.
Oh, that was my last question for you, Jane, was for those of us who love the Society of Shame and we want more Jane Roper, we've already subscribed to your Substack. Do you have a new project in the works that you can talk about, or is it too soon? Which I totally respect if it's too soon.
I think it's too soon to talk about. It's really just still baking, but I think it's going to take place on a coastal town. So there we have a little tie back to, not in Maine though, in Massachusetts, but
perfect.
We'll take it.
There'll be a bookstore. I'll have to put a bookstore there. So.
Yeah, you have 9. You have 9 to go. No, I really want you to take this Sherman's passport idea back to your marketing team.
I love it.
Can I ask a quick question of Noah?
Yes, please.
So, because I think a constant thing with shops in town, touristy kind of towns, is the ice cream issue. Do you have a strict no ice cream in the store policy?
Oh my God, no! Please bring your ice cream.
Really? Okay.
Bring your ice cream. Bring your dogs. bring
Okay.
it on. Yeah.
That's very lenient. I like that you're allowed to bring your ice cream.
I love the dogs. That's fantastic. Noah, our last question always goes to the bookseller. Please finish this sentence for us. Running a successful bookstore, or in your case, bookstore empire, is part hard work, part luck, and part what else?
I would say good people, both customers from away and from Maine, but also booksellers at every single Sherman's. You know, we couldn't do it without really, really great people. So
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's so true. I think that's so true. And I love that phrase, from away. That's a Maine thing, isn't it?
Oh yeah, big
So
time.
can you explain what that is for our audience that's watching that's not from Maine? What does it mean you say from away?
Yes, from away means that you're not from Maine. Yeah, pretty much. So you're either from Maine or you're from away.
I love that.
I love that.
Thank you both for being with us today. We really enjoyed having you on the show. And definitely, if our audience, if you're heading to Maine this summer, please stop by one of the 9 or all 9 Sherman's locations. Jane, I love this book.
Thank
I'm
you.
so happy for you. And I want everyone to read it. Go pick up your copy today, link below. To our audience, if you liked today's show, and we certainly hope that you did, please subscribe to A Mighty Blaze on Facebook to get notified about all of our other events. Or if you're not a Facebook person, please hop over to our website at mightyblaze.com to sign up for our newsletter. It goes out once a week, gives you the rundown of all of the interviews. We will be back next week, Wednesday, May 24th. For our 134th episode, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on A Mighty Blaze. Please join us then. Until we meet again, be well and keep reading. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.